And again, it was in amongst a lot of other guests, and she was very friendly, and no, it was fine.
She's very welcoming. She knew it was...
Charlotte was the little girl who waved with innocence, but now her transformation has stunned even her own parents. Princess Charlotte isn't just growing up. She's evolving into something the monarchy didn't anticipate. The sweet, smiling child who once clung to her mother's hand has been replaced by a sharply composed young girl whose poise is unsettling, not because it's rehearsed, but because it's natural. Her gestures have become precise, her posture carries weight, and her presence at just 9 years old now holds the kind of authority that turns heads in silence. This isn't a case of early maturity. It's something deeper, more deliberate, and far more unexpected. She's not preparing for a royal role. She's stepping into it before anyone told her she could. Those closest to her are beginning to feel it too. William's smile doesn't linger as long when Charlotte takes control of a moment. Kate holds her shoulder just a second longer, as if trying to keep her grounded. They haven't said anything publicly, but their glances, their hesitations, speak volumes. It's not fear of rebellion, it's fear of power. Because when a child starts carrying herself like she knows exactly who she is and where she's going, even the most prepared parents can't help but wonder if they've created something bigger than they ever intended. And behind the walls of the palace, that realization is spreading. Staff, aides, and senior insiders are no longer dismissing her as the second-born. They're watching her closely, cautiously. Not because she's misbehaving, but because she's performing too well. Charlotte doesn't need to be reminded how to act, how to stand, how to speak. She just does. With precision, with purpose, with presence. She's not being molded by the crown, she's shaping herself around it. And that alone is enough to shift the dynamic behind closed doors. Some say it's Middleton's strength. Others say it's Diana's bloodline resurfacing in the most unpredictable way, quiet, powerful, and unwilling to be ignored. But those comparisons, while flattering, still fall short. Because Charlotte isn't repeating history. She's rewriting it. She's not waiting for permission. She's not following in anyone's footsteps. She's setting the pace, one flawless moment at a time, without ever raising her voice. And while the world tries to make sense of what she's becoming, those who know her best are asking a far more urgent question, not what role she'll grow into, but who will be forced to adjust when she outgrows the roles completely. But if her public shift shocked the world, the first real signs of this transformation started behind palace walls. The red coat on her first day of school was cute, until you realized what it foreshadowed. That moment, captured by millions, seemed ordinary at first glance. A young girl, barely out of toddlerhood, clutching her backpack with a spark in her eye, and dressed in a scarlet coat that screamed childhood. But beneath the sweetness of that image, there was something unsettling, something unspoken. The world saw a princess heading off to school. What they didn't see was the subtle shift in Charlotte's role. That first step through the gates of Thomas's Battersea wasn't just about education. It was the first step into an identity that would slowly begin to overshadow the little girl herself. That red coat, once a symbol of innocence, now reads like a warning. This child was never going to live an ordinary life. Even then, her confidence was alarming. Children cry on their first day. They cling. They hesitate. Charlotte didn't. Holding her brother's hand and walking with steady determination, she was calm, too calm. Her expression carried something more than readiness. It carried awareness. She knew where she was. She knew who she was. And more frighteningly, she seemed to know who she was meant to become. From that moment, her path was quietly sealed. Not just as a royal child, but as someone being carefully shaped into something greater, something calculated. The world couldn't look away. The public's fascination ignited instantly. News outlets raced to dissect her mannerisms, body language experts speculated about her poise, and fashion commentators praised her polished look. But this wasn't about clothes or charm. It was about control. Charlotte, unlike other children, wasn't given the luxury of stumbling in public. Her every step, every smile, was absorbed, analyzed, archived. She was no longer just a daughter of William and Kate. She was a projection, a symbol, a reflection of everything the royal family wanted the future to look like, and everything it feared losing. Still, it wasn't the pressure alone that made her different. It was how she responded to it. While other royal children once faltered under the weight of expectation, Charlotte stood taller. When she curtsied, it wasn't with uncertainty. When she waved, it wasn't out of obligation. She seemed to understand the assignment before anyone had handed it to her. And that's when the whispers began. Was she just another royal figure in training? Or something far more formidable? Was she a child following rules? Or a rising figure rewriting them from within? She became more than a supporting royal before she ever spoke on camera. She didn't need a voice, her presence was enough. Even then, as the second-born, she outshone expectations. Her name wasn't first in line, but her demeanor said otherwise. And slowly, without protest, she began to steal the spotlight from those around her not by force, but by inevitability. The heir may be Prince George, but it was Princess Charlotte who seemed born to command. And while the world watched her every move, one unexpected moment rewrote how they saw her forever. One bow, one tear, and suddenly, the world saw her differently. It was supposed to be a somber day, a farewell steeped in ritual and silence. But in that sea of black coats and ceremonial grief, one small figure stood apart, not because of what she said, but because of what she did. Princess Charlotte, only 7 years old, bowed her head with a grace that stunned the nation. Her curtsy to Queen Elizabeth II's coffin wasn't rehearsed pageantry, it was instinct. It was reverence wrapped in steel. And in that brief, almost imperceptible motion, everything shifted. The public had expected to see a child clinging to her parents. Instead, they saw a royal rising into her own shadow. Beside her, Prince George faltered. The pressure of the moment, the weight of centuries of tradition, was too much. His tears came first quiet, then trembling. It should have been the adults who stepped in, but it wasn't. It was Charlotte. With the quiet poise of someone twice her age, she leaned toward her brother, whispered something only he could hear, and gently guided him back into composure. That gesture, so simple yet profound, didn't go unnoticed. Cameras captured it. Headlines magnified it. And suddenly, this wasn't just a funeral, it was a revelation. Pinned to her coat was a small horseshoe brooch, a tribute to the Queen's lifelong love of horses. But it wasn't just jewelry. It was symbolism, a nod to legacy, a child's silent promise that the values of the monarch wouldn't die with her. Charlotte's posture was flawless, her presence unshakable. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink. She didn't break. And as the coffin passed, it was her bow that burned into the public's memory more than the salutes, more than the hymns, more than the rehearsed remarks, because it wasn't political. It was personal. It was raw. And it was devastatingly real. Kate, standing behind her, placed a firm but gentle hand on Charlotte's back. It was a mother's silent expression of awe, as if even she couldn't fully comprehend what her daughter had just become in that moment. William's eyes, glassy and fixed, lingered on Charlotte longer than anyone else. Not because he feared she'd falter, but because he knew she hadn't. It was pride, laced with disbelief. And perhaps a tinge of fear. Because that wasn't the little girl they tucked into bed the night before. That was someone else now. And so the comparisons began. Not from tabloids, but from those who remembered. Diana, the people's princess, the woman who redefined royal emotion, who bore the same haunting strength wrapped in gentleness. And now, the world saw echoes of her in Charlotte, flickers of grace under fire, poise under scrutiny, and empathy when it mattered most. It wasn't mimicry, it was legacy, inherited not just through blood, but through presence. That moment wasn't just grief, it was a signal of something more. A new kind of royal was emerging. The world lost Diana, but in Charlotte, they saw something familiar and haunting. It started as a whisper, a glance, a pause in a headline, and then it grew. Not because someone pushed the narrative, but because no one could ignore what they saw. In Charlotte's smile, soft, steady, and knowing there was something that didn't belong to her generation, something older, something echoing. Her gestures, her grace, the way she looked at people not through them, but into them. It was all too familiar. The press didn't need to search for comparisons. The resemblance was waiting in plain sight. And the public? They didn't just see Diana in Charlotte. They felt her, as though a spirit had returned not to haunt, but to guide. It wasn't about features or fashion. It was about presence. About how Charlotte held space in a room far larger than herself. At events where most children fidgeted, Charlotte calmed. Where others sought attention, she offered comfort. Her small, instinctual gestures, the protective glance toward George, the calming touch for Louis spoke louder than rehearsed addresses. It was empathy without demand, soft strength. Diana didn't teach her that, but somehow Charlotte carried it all the same. And the timing of it, the seamless way she adapted, made people believe something larger was at work. William noticed it first. Not in a grand moment, but in the quiet ones. The way Charlotte tilted her head when someone cried. The way she stood slightly ahead of her brothers at events not to be seen, but to shield. He had seen those movements before. In a woman who once comforted AIDS patients in silence. In a mother who touched hands through car windows and walked through landmine fields not for glory, but because it was right. Watching Charlotte became a painful mirror, one that reflected both love and loss, and it broke him in places he thought had long healed. Kate felt it too. And though she had never met Diana, the weight of her legacy loomed large. Not in the palace halls, but in the expectations that surrounded her daughter. The praise stung, just as much as it swelled their hearts. Because for every compliment, there was a shadow. For every nod to Diana's kindness, there was a reminder of what the monarchy once failed to protect. Charlotte wasn't just Diana's echo, she was a chance to do things differently. And that chance came with a price. The comparisons brought pride, yes, but they also brought fear. Fear that Charlotte might one day carry more than her share of burdens. Fear that history, so quick to repeat itself, might find another target. Still, there was no denying it. Charlotte wasn't becoming Diana, she was channeling her. In spirit, in instinct, in impact. The public leaned in, enchanted and unsettled. Because in her small frame, they saw more than just a princess. They saw redemption, continuity, maybe even healing. She wasn't Diana's replacement, but she was a reminder that love like hers doesn't vanish. It waits, and sometimes it returns wearing a smaller smile. But the transformation wasn't accidental. It was carefully shaped by the woman behind the scenes, Kate Middleton. Behind every poised child is a parent with a plan, and Kate's was nothing short of royal engineering. While the world watched Charlotte emerge as a symbol of grace, most missed the invisible scaffolding that made her so. That scaffolding was Kate. Not the Princess of Wales with her public duties and polished image, but the mother behind closed doors who had made a quiet decision long ago. Her daughter would never be defined by her title alone. And so, while royal tradition demanded Charlotte learn the language of the crown, Kate taught her the language of resilience. Where the institution provided scripts and ceremonies, Kate offered something far more lasting emotional strength wrapped in maternal instinct. It didn't happen in grand lessons or lectures. It happened in the in-between moments, in whispered advice before stepping onto a public stage, in casual games that subtly folded in lessons about eye contact, posture, and tone, in curtsies practiced not under pressure, but woven into bedtime, routines like lullabies with purpose. Kate never forced Charlotte to be regal. She made it feel natural. She let her daughter play, laugh, question. And only then, when trust was strong, she layered in the expectations. Not as burdens, but as privileges. Not because she had to, but because she could. Charlotte didn't just memorize royal behavior. She understood it, and that understanding came from her mother. The world saw flashes of this quiet training during their public appearances. When Charlotte curtsied with flawless timing at high-pressure events, it wasn't coincidence. It was preparation. But it wasn't robotic. That's what made it powerful. It carried the grace of a child who knew the meaning of what she was doing. At Queen Elizabeth's funeral, when most expected tears, Charlotte delivered reverence. And the calm hand on her back? That was Kate never overshadowing, only supporting, letting her daughter stand on her own, but never alone. It was the most radical act a royal mother could do, not shield her daughter from duty, but arm her for it. Kate's blueprint wasn't designed for pageantry. It was built for endurance. She raised Charlotte not just to fulfill a role, but to rewrite it, to know when to speak, and when silence could say more. She didn't merely prepare her for media scrutiny, but for emotional self-reliance. And that required more than royal training. That required trust. And Kate earned it the hard way, by listening more than lecturing, by walking alongside her daughter instead of ahead of her. She let Charlotte grow into her strength without ever making her feel like she had something to prove. Charlotte's maturity didn't bloom in the palace halls, it bloomed in the quiet moments that no camera captured. That's the genius of Kate's blueprint. She understood what the world would one day demand of her daughter, and she met it with a calm strategy rooted not in control, but in connection. Charlotte isn't just Kate's daughter. She's her legacy in motion, a reflection of a woman who chose to lead from the shadows and build strength that could never be shaken by spotlight. But if Kate was the architect of her daughter's strength, then Prince William became her emotional compass. He calls her Manette. But what if she's more than just daddy's girl? To the world, she's a princess. To the monarchy, she's a symbol of continuity. But to Prince William, she's something else entirely. From the moment he first held her, Charlotte became the one thing he couldn't protect with protocol or prestige. She was his daughter, yes, but she was also the living, breathing reminder of everything he'd loved and lost. The nickname, Manette, spoken in quiet moments away from palace walls, reveals more than affection. It reveals fragility, a softness buried beneath royal armor. But as Charlotte grows, so does the distance between the little girl who clutched his hand and the young woman now commanding global attention with her presence. And for William, that evolution is a mixture of unbearable pride and subtle heartbreak. He's proud, undeniably. Her poise, her confidence, her uncanny emotional intelligence, it amazes him. But it also unsettles him, because he knows what comes next. He's seen it, lived it. He remembers a mother whose grace was both a gift and a curse. And now he watches Charlotte carry herself with that same instinct for empathy, that same fire beneath her calm. Her elegance doesn't feel taught, it feels inherited. And that scares him, because the world didn't always reward Diana's grace. It scrutinized it, exploited it, broke it. And now William sees flickers of that same light in Charlotte. It glows brilliantly, but it also paints a target. Their bond, though, remains something sacred. He shares more with Charlotte than royal blood. Together, they find quiet joy in unlikely places, opera houses filled with stories of sacrifice, sporting events where victory is measured in shared laughter, and concerts where, for just a night, the crown disappears. At a recent Taylor Swift concert, William and Charlotte danced not as future monarch and royal heir, but as father and daughter, lost in the moment. It was fleeting, it was beautiful, and it was real. These are the moments he clings to, because each year, Charlotte grows further into the figure the public wants her to be, and further away from the little girl he once carried across palace floors. But even in those moments of joy, something lingers in William's eyes. A hesitation, a knowledge that she is rising faster than he can follow. And as she matures, there are times he finds himself standing a step behind, watching her lead her brothers through royal ceremonies, correct their posture, offer them strength. He smiles, but sometimes that smile hides sorrow. Because with every display of leadership, he sees less of the child, and more of the future queen she may never be, but who already casts a larger shadow than he ever imagined. Charlotte is no longer just his manette. She is a force, a blend of past and present. A girl raised in the spotlight yet grounded in something deeper. William has given her love, protection, and wisdom. But he also knows that some battles she will fight, alone. And that realization stings in ways he'll never admit. But no one outside of her parents has shaped her royal destiny more than one woman, Princess Anne. She never said much, but every move Charlotte makes whispers of Anne. In a family built on ceremony and restraint, Princess Anne carved her legacy not through words, but through relentless action. The hardest-working royal, the quiet force, the woman who never chased the spotlight, yet never once failed to show up. While others wavered, Anne stood firm, unshaken, unapologetic, and above all, disciplined. And now, in the sharp poise of a 9-year-old girl, the echoes of that legacy are unmistakable. Because while Charlotte may share Diana's heart, it's Anne's fire she carries in her stride. And it's no coincidence. It's mentorship, delivered not in speeches, but in silent looks, strategic nudges, and ironclad example. Behind palace walls, Anne never pushed. She didn't lecture. She didn't fawn. What she offered Charlotte was rarer: trust. She treated the young princess not as a fragile child, but as a future force. And Charlotte, in turn, responded not with rebellion, but with instinctual alignment. At key family gatherings, they stood side by side. Watch closely, and you'd see Anne leaning in not to control, but to guide. Not to instruct, but to prepare. It was the kind of mentorship that doesn't announce itself, but reveals its impact in the smallest moments. And then came the Jubilee. In the middle of chaos, with cameras rolling and the world watching, it wasn't an adult who stepped in to restore order. It was Charlotte leaning calmly toward her brother Louis, placing a steady hand, correcting his antics without raising her voice. It was firm. It was controlled. And it was vintage Anne, a public display of quiet leadership, precise and without performance. That single act spoke volumes not just about Charlotte's maturity, but about who was shaping her from behind the curtain. And when Camilla's coronation sparked murmurs and subtle tension, Charlotte's behavior turned heads again. She stood her ground, graceful but unyielding, her gaze sharp, her posture unapologetic. And then came the moment that sent ripples through royal circles, a barely perceptible act of defiance, a turned shoulder, a pause that seemed longer than it was, a look that needed no words. It wasn't a tantrum, it was strategy, it was restraint. It was Anne's style, an act of resistance so polished it could pass for protocol. So when whispers began to circulate about the next Princess Royal, it wasn't a surprise, it was confirmation. Anne, now 74, with decades of service and zero tolerance for pretense, wasn't passing the title out of obligation. She was passing it to someone who had already proven worthy. Not in deeds grand enough for headlines, but in the quiet mastery of royal essence. Charlotte hadn't just inherited the potential, she had earned the legacy. Anne's torch doesn't burn bright, it burns steady. And in Charlotte's steady ascent, it's clear the flame has found its next bearer. Because Anne didn't need applause to lead, and neither will Charlotte. She'll lead in glances, in timing, in stillness that shakes the room. The world may not always see it, but those who matter, they'll feel it. But what does it mean to become Princess Royal? And what future awaits a girl groomed to lead without a crown? She may never wear the crown, but she might wield more power than the king himself. That's the paradox of Princess Charlotte. Born not as heir, but never quite a spare. She occupies a place the monarchy doesn't know how to categorize, neither bound for the throne nor free from its gravity. And yet, behind palace gates, there's a quiet understanding taking shape. Charlotte is being prepared not to rule, but to lead, to operate in the shadows of sovereignty, where influence runs deeper than ceremony, where strategy matters more than status, and where legacy isn't defined by a title, but by the power to shape everything that title touches. Her education has never followed a conventional path. While the world expected ballet recitals and foreign languages, Charlotte was absorbing lessons in statecraft, diplomacy, and military strategy. Her training mirrors that of those destined for command. Behind the public-facing appearances, she's been exposed to tactical thinking, crisis management simulations, and even briefings, with advisors tied to special operations units. Reports suggest introductions to elite forces like the SAS not to turn her into a soldier, but to ensure she can lead in moments when the stakes are life and death, not just PR and protocol. And still, this preparation isn't just symbolic. It's structural. Charlotte's future may include a duchess title, likely bestowed upon her when she comes of age or marries, but that won't be her only badge of significance. Military honors and ceremonial coronelcies are already being discussed, positioning her as a bridge between the monarchy and the armed forces. These honors, traditionally reserved for senior royals or reigning monarchs, signal something radical, a shift in royal architecture, where power is no longer just about hierarchy, but about utility, relevance, presence. And Charlotte checks every box. She is not being groomed to support her brother, she's being trained to flank him, not just as a sibling, but as his greatest asset, a strategic royal leader in her own right, one who can enter rooms he cannot, speak truths he shouldn't, absorb public heat when he must remain silent. Her visibility is carefully crafted, but her utility is even more deliberate. Charlotte is being molded not as a complement to the crown, but as a safeguard for it. In the years ahead, when Prince George steps into full public duty, it will be Charlotte standing beside him, not behind. And, in doing so, she may become something even more significant than a monarch, the trusted face of a new royal generation. Her youth, charm, and growing emotional intelligence position her as the perfect emissary to the modern world. Where William and Kate struggle with tradition, and George will be burdened with authority, Charlotte will navigate with agility. She's the one who can modernize without mutiny, adapt without compromising the institution. The palace isn't just investing in her presence, it's betting on her judgment. And yet, it's not titles or honors that truly define her. It's how she holds her family together when no one is watching. She's just 9, but within palace walls, they call her the glue. In a family defined by hierarchy and duty, where public roles often overshadow private bonds, it's easy for closeness to get lost in formality. But not with Charlotte. Amid royal titles and centuries-old expectations, she's managed to do something almost impossible. She's made royalty feel human again. Behind the formality, beneath the headlines, she's become the emotional center of the Wales household. Not through declarations, but through intuition. Through the quiet, steady force of a child who understands more than most adults ever will. Charlotte doesn't just love her brothers, she grounds them. She doesn't just respect her parents, she subtly leads them. And for the family at the center of the world's attention, she has become something sacred. A source of stability no crown can replicate. It's no secret that Prince Louis, spirited and expressive, often finds the royal stage a challenge. The world has seen it, his bursts of energy, his playful defiance, the moments that veer off script. But Charlotte never scolds. She doesn't shame. She steadies him. Whether it's a whispered word, a reassuring touch, or a quiet glance that says, "I'm here," she has become the only person who can instantly anchor him. They call her the Louis Whisperer, and it's not just a nickname. It's a reflection of the deep, unspoken trust between them. When Louis is overwhelmed, he looks not to the guards, not to the staff, not even to his parents. He looks to Charlotte, and every time she delivers calm. What's even more remarkable is that her leadership doesn't stop with the youngest. Even Prince George, future King of England, often leans on his sister. It may defy traditional roles, but Charlotte's strength makes hierarchy irrelevant. She reads a room better than most seasoned aides. When George falters in the spotlight, she offers reassurance. When he's burdened by the weight of expectations, she's the first to notice. Her maturity disarms those around her, not because it feels rehearsed, but because it feels real. In the middle of an ancient institution, Charlotte has become the voice of emotional wisdom. wrapped in a child's candor. It hasn't gone unnoticed by William and Kate. In fact, her natural sense of empathy has quietly reshaped their parenting. The formal rigidity once expected of royal children has softened. William now leans into fatherhood with more emotional openness. Kate embraces vulnerability in public, in ways she never did before. And all of it traces back to Charlotte, her quiet influence, her gentle insistence on warmth, connection, and truth. She's not just following royal protocol, she's redefining it. Her presence has blurred the line between tradition and tenderness, ushering in a new model for royal identity: modern, empathetic, and impossibly strong. Charlotte isn't growing up to fit into a mold. She's molding the shape of the family itself. She is the unseen thread that keeps them stitched together in the public eye and behind palace doors. Her bond with her brothers, her emotional awareness, and her natural gift for unity have already made her irreplaceable. And as she continues to evolve, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. She's not just supporting the future of the monarchy, she is its future. But is this transformation a sign of rebellion, or the rise of a new kind of royal leader? One thing is certain, Charlotte isn't just growing up. Drop your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one.